back with another solo Q&A, and today I am fitting this in before work at 7 a.m. and I am absolutely back to back before I go to Dubai, and I want to get this one in the diary. So if you're listening to this after the fact, then this has been recorded before I've been on holiday, and I'm hopefully kept up with my upload schedule commitments. I think I've got 29 questions in total and some really, really good ones in here. So let's get underway. Question number one: what do you value more for self-development? Individual work, such as exercise and reading, or networking, the opportunities and knowledge that arise through meeting people? And alongside that, how do you manage your time to achieve an appropriate balance between the two, individual work and networking? For me, individual work comes first. It actually gives you something to bring to the table and exchange value on when you do choose to network. So by you investing in yourself through your exercise, your reading, what you consume, like the courses that you go on, the mentors that you sign up to get their information, that means that it's not all one way when it comes to having a discussion. So when you do meet up to network, you are able to give value and exchange it. It doesn't all have to be like 100% equal each way in terms of both giving 50% in exchange in terms of value when you meet somebody, because whenever you network, you'll quite often be trying to network with people that can give you more than you can give them at that moment in time, and that's fine. But turning up and having done some of the work in advance, I think is helpful. Like doing your homework would be a good analogy for it. In terms of like time split, for me personally, it's probably about 65% individual work to 35% networking. It definitely varies at different times of the year, though. So for others, it might actually be a lot higher in terms of either direction. So you might do a lot more individual work if that's your learning style. You might do a lot more networking if that's your learning style. Equally, at different times, I think you can shift depending on what different area you're focusing on. So there might be like if, for example, I'm learning about investing in finance, I might do a lot more individual work initially versus networking. I would be doing a lot more networking if I was looking to improve my social skills or my relationship dynamics or my public speaking, or I was working directly with a coach who I was spending time with. Then that might be the way it was split. Question number two: your YouTube name is Colin Campbell rather than CamBro Conversations. Why is that? It's an interesting question, isn't it? I got this advice from Chris Williamson, who hosts Modern Wisdom podcast, and the reason for it is that not every video that goes up on my YouTube channel might be a podcast. If, for example, I want to do a piece to camera talking about a new piece of news, and I don't want to release that as a full podcast, then having my name as the YouTube channel allows me to do that. Whereas if my YouTube channel is purely called CamBro Conversations, then there's an expectation that it is only about the podcast, so there's no personal element to it or variation of content that goes on Spotify and Apple. Speaking of YouTube, if you haven't subscribed, please jump across. I think there's about 300 people over there, so it's a little bit of a quiet space. So please do jump across and hit the subscribe button. Number three: what are you reading right now? I am just finishing Status Games by Will Storr. It's been great. It's a real deep dive into why humans act in their own best interests almost all times, and the different ways that we measure and compare ourselves versus others across so many different domains. And having read it, it explains a lot about what we see both in the workplace but also online in terms of what people are posting, what people are sharing. I am buying another couple of books for reading while I go on holiday to Dubai, but they are TBC. So you'll be listening to this after this is recorded, and you'll probably see what I've posted on my Instagram stories. But I'm swinging between something by Daniel Priestley, I think it's called Oversubscribed, recommended by my good friend Mr. Chris Burns, or another book on like attachment and loneliness, which links to when I spoke to Adam Lane Smith. I think it's called Attached. Number four, related to holiday again. Will you be drinking on holiday? Yes, the plan is to drink on a couple of occasions. I typically drink a lot more when I go on holiday than when I'm at home. When I'm at home, I pretty much don't drink at all. When I am on holiday, I'll probably drink once or twice when I'm away. I'm away for a full 13 days. So it's likely that I'll drink maybe more than twice, depending on what events are on. I think it will be, in my own head, I will justify that the experience will be better when I am a little bit looser. And that's always a cost benefit that I weigh up. Whereas I think in Glasgow and Scotland, I'm not massively tempted. A lot of the events that I go to, I enjoy perfectly sober. Whereas if you're in a beach club, the sun's out, you're with your friends, the tunes are on, I just think the atmosphere lends itself better to adding to it with a stimulant. Number 5, what would it take for the show to be twice a week every single week? Interesting, again, relates probably to like the kind of back end stuff of the show. For me, being able to upload twice a week frequency requires more time in my diary. It probably requires more physical support to outsource some of the tasks that I do around it. So if I could outsource more of my clips and my picking of those clips to my editor, if I could outsource somebody uploading to YouTube for me, if I could outsource somebody writing the show notes. But I actually quite like having control of the show notes and picking the clips. So it's very, very difficult. I like to research my own guests and invite my own guests, but I see some shows have like a virtual assistant who will reach out to guests and chase those down as well. From a fiscal element as well, I would probably have to justify spending more time on it outside of my like allotted hours already to make it work. So whether that would be sponsors being charged a little bit more to justify that, or whether that would be me having like a Patreon or a product, or I've got that buy me a coffee link in my show notes, but I don't really push that, and I don't expect people to like always throw money at that, and it wouldn't ever become something that would be an income stream. But to go twice a week, I think I would just need a little bit more time. I think based on how hard I've worked the last couple of weeks before I go on holiday, and potentially recording a couple of podcasts while I'm out there, which is quite exciting, I will hopefully be able to do almost twice a week over the Christmas period, which should be great. And I hope you all enjoy that and show your support during that time. Number 6, have you ever included massages and cupping to support your training and recovery? I probably had 4 or 5 sports massages ever. And I think you might feel a little better sometimes if you're getting regular massages done on a fortnightly or a monthly basis. But if you're looking at bang for your buck activities, or it's not going to be my choice. And I have always leant towards nailing sleep and nutrition far more, because those have exponentially higher returns, like so much more return from nailing your sleep and nutrition than there is from somebody giving you a rub down. You mentioned cupping. Cupping has almost zero evidence showing benefits at all. I'm happy to be critiqued on that, but every piece of literature that I've looked at, and any physio or like sports therapist that I've spoken to that's really in the know and highly rated, has completely dismissed cupping as a means of real recovery. If you have something that's very specific, maybe it's helpful, but if you are somebody that's just looking to improve your recovery a little bit, and the practitioner you're going to see is just pulling out the cups, I think it's more about showing that they're doing something than actually doing something. I'll caveat all of this: if you're a pro athlete and you're looking to get the tiny percentage improvements, and I'm not sure that's many people within my audience, regular massaging may help, but I personally don't have the time, and I wouldn't make the changes to my schedule and commitments to get one. However, if you actually get like a lot of enjoyment from massage and it makes you feel like you're recovering more, then the placebo effect is a hell of a drug, and also enjoyment is very important in terms of your structure too. Number 7, have you felt more confident in your smile since your work that you had done? What treatment/cosmetic surgery did you get? The surgery piece made me laugh, but I suppose it is a form of cosmetic surgery to get dental work done. So I got whitening and composite bonding done on my front 4 teeth. I had a gap on the left hand side and on the right hand side. I had braces as a teenager for about 2.5 years, and as I always had an overbite, quite a prominent like set of like front teeth, almost like buck teeth, and the braces were really effective. They moved them back. But over the years, I didn't wear the retainer that I was given back in, I mean, such a long time ago. And this is a funny one. One of my friends said to me, I can't believe somebody with your personality type and like how focused you are wasn't wearing his retainer. I have definitely evolved over the years. Like, I'm 30 now. Like, I'm not the same person I was when I was like 16, 17, 18. Like, I'm a much more actualized and focused and inline person now, whereas there I was probably just like coasting along, and the retainer was uncomfortable. The kind of less modern ones that they have were so bad, so I just wasn't fussed about wearing it at all, which unfortunately meant that gaps opened up on either side of my front 4 teeth. The one on the left hand side was actually particularly prominent, and it was actually through doing quite a lot of filming in podcast studios and doing some like workouts on camera for like factory weights that I started to become a little bit more self-conscious about it. And I am somebody that's pretty confident in how I look and how I'm presented. I try and be happy with how I look, and it's very important for me. So I worked with Scottish Dental Care, which is SDC, Scottish Dental Clinic, and they have, I think, 12 dentists across Scotland, and I worked at the Cardonald one with Dr. Neil Scott. Neil went through a really thorough assessment with me to decide what we were going to do in terms of tackling that, because everyone immediately gravitates towards Invisalign, and we looked at the timescales and we were pretty much able to get a pretty much instant result. We're talking within 3-4 weeks with composite bonding, and the result's been excellent. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm all smiles, and the gaps on either side of my mouth, as I'm twisting away from the mic, are fully closed up, and my teeth are much whiter as well. So the treatment was excellent, and yeah, I feel really confident in my smile. I kind of always did. I always quite like my smile. I didn't want loads and loads of work done. I didn't want my teeth to be different, to be shaped differently, or to move tremendously. I just wanted those gaps filled in, so it's all pearly white at the front. Question number 8. What topics get you most excited to discuss? Any topic that I choose to have on the show, I'm excited about. I probably wouldn't host one that I wasn't looking forward to in any shape or form. But in terms of the most, I think I've been pretty excited recently to talk about the personal finance ones. Those have been great, and they get really well received by the audience. Equally, having people like Sahil Bloom and Rob Lipsett on is really exciting, just because of how much of their content I've consumed over the years and how much I've taken from them, and I'm keen to dive into that with them, particularly Sahil when it came to the mental models, because how you make life choices and assess your alignment and your decisions is something that more and more of us need to think about, because it's far too easy to end up on the train tracks towards whatever destination you think you need to go towards, and you've not really made an assessment. So yeah, I get excited about lots of different topics. So some guests are harder to prepare for than others, because they've maybe got less content out there, or it's less obvious what I might want to ask them about. But I'll always have a good idea of where I want to go with it, and what topics I'm keen to bring from a personal perspective, but also to support you guys. Right, here we go. 2 Rangers questions back to back, and then we'll move on from the football, because it's a bit of a sore point at the moment. Number 9. 3 reasons why you think it went wrong for Rangers this season. Firstly, the recruitment of incoming players has been really poor. They haven't replaced Bassey or Aribo to the level that we would have wanted to, and the contract extensions for older players and not moving on of other players who've been there for a while and probably got a bit stale or are past their best has been a tremendous mistake, and the standard of player that's come in is just not really been good enough. Linked to that is actually the attitude and the fitness of key players within the squad. We didn't refresh when needed. Everyone knows, or a lot of people will know, I've absolutely loved Alfredo Morelos for such a long time, and I think there's a solo podcast at the start of this season where I said give him a 5-year deal. I absolutely retract that now. While he's given me some great memories watching Rangers, and he's scored some very, very important goals, and I've always quite liked how much other teams don't like him and we like him. His professionalism this season in terms of coming back fit and just applying himself has been so poor. So on reflection, the attitude and the fitness of some of the key players, I want to say Morelos, Kent, even Tavernier doesn't look fit. Should Rangers have recycled these players and moved them on at a time where their value was at a peak, potentially they should have considered that and then reinvested into younger players who could come in and bring something fresh. Kent, I actually feel a bit sorry for, because while he's hopelessly out of form, he continues to try pretty hard. But I think when he's hit the high of winning the league that he came here to win and then got into the Europa League final, I think you can see in him there's a staleness to how he feels potentially about playing another game away at St Johnstone, or playing another home game against Livingston, who are sitting in 10 men behind the ball. But that is a challenge of when you play for Rangers. You need to win relentlessly in order to win the league, because that's what Celtic are doing. So you need to just get over that and crack on. And sometimes freshening up the team and having new players come in is a way to do that. Right. 3rd reason, the manager's not getting the best at the side. I'm very thankful for what Gio has done, and that's linked to the next question that's coming up. But while injuries have been pretty brutal, I don't think the squad's been managed particularly well from a freshness perspective, and that links to the recruitment too. But tactically, we just don't look like we are getting the best out of the players, and I don't think he has the same motivational factor that Gerrard did for a lot of his period. And I don't think there's elements tactically. I think there's elements where he's more flexible within games than Gerrard and Beale were, but he is not getting the the best out of the players in terms of a style of play, and that links to question 10: should Rangers back or sack Gio? I massively appreciate the European success last year. Getting to the Europa League final was some of my best memories supporting Rangers, but the domestic form last season, apart from the cup win, was shocking. We blew a 7 point lead or 6 point lead to Celtic, and even I'll caveat that again, like getting to the Champions League in terms of beating USG and then PSV is a tremendous achievement and financially so important to the club. But domestically, we lack consistency and real confidence that you're going to win every single game, or at least look like you're going to win every single game. And that links again to the style of play. It's poor, it's slow, it's turgid. The buy-in from the players, I think, is low as well. So I don't think there's like a really identifiable style and pattern of play, which is a massive red flag for me. And I wonder whether Gio can come back from the position that we're in, where the players and a lot of the fans do not look like they believe he's the man, which is a real challenge for somebody to come back from. Right, enough football. Number 11, how do you stay on top of nutrition with a packed schedule? I sometimes feel organised, but other times feel rushed. Investment in your nutrition is not just an investment in your body, but it's an investment in your mind as well. And while you're saying things like feel organized and feel rushed, I think that's very important, because that will have a reflection on how well you apply yourself in the different areas that you've got. I know with how I'm wired, I will not feel particularly in a moment or in a task if I'm worrying about something else. And if you're feeling rushed or unorganized, then you might not be able to apply yourself to the things that you are actually spending your time doing. So for me, the number one thing has always been over the years to be prepared. And nowadays that looks like having my clean foods meal prep sent on a weekly basis. So that arrives on a Monday and I get 10 meals, which is 5 lunches and 5 dinners. And that takes 90 to 2 hours time out of my week in terms of cooking that I would do on a Sunday previously. So that's absolutely massive. And some of those meals are ones that I heat when I'm working from home, and then like the pasta meals are ones that I take when I'm out and about at meetings, or when I'm out and about like going to a podcast. That people have seen me smashing a turkey bolognese clean foods in my car before a podcast recording as well. So that's been absolutely massive. Making sure that I've done a weekly shop that ticks all my boxes. So I go to Aldi or Asda or both once a week in one visit, and I have my fridge absolutely packed. I have foods that I can have on the go. So I have a biltong for my protein, I have protein bars, I have whey protein. I also have breakfast shakes. I use Vibe, which is a meal replacement shake, and that's like a powdered shake with, I think it's about 29 grams of protein for around 400 calories, but it's got some included nutrients in it as well, so it's more nutritious than if you were just having a whey protein shake. Obviously it's higher calorie, but it's got some excellent nutrients. It's also got lion's mane in it, which is a nootropic for focus. So I find if I'm having that, I'll put it in the blender because it's quite thick and quite filling, which again was one of my misconceptions when it came to actually like drinking liquid calories. You're always worried it's going to fill you up. So making sure that I've got that on deck as an option as well. So when I'm starting work in the morning on my laptop, actually after I finish this recording, I'll probably make a shake up and get into my work emails. That's been important as well. So I feel like I'm on top of things. And the last thing is I'm having similar meals and combinations and similar times throughout the day and throughout the week. And that takes an awful lot of the thinking out of it. If you're somebody that really struggles with eating the same things regularly, I would strongly encourage you to try it and see how you feel about it if you do it on a regular basis. Everyone complains about boredom, but once you're into routine and into a flow and only include things that you really like to eat, I think you might actually end up finding you've got more time, you feel more organized. So that's my approach. Meal prep from clean foods, making sure I've got that on deck. Shakes, ready-made foods like biltong, protein bars, Vibe, and then having similar structure and routine. Question number 12. What skills have you improved as a host since you started? I think my research was always good and it was always something that I pride myself on, but I've also started to find new sources to check and look at for some guests. And you'll have noticed in some recent episodes, some guests are like, holy shit, how do you know that like Johnny Starr and Brad Burton are two in particular that were like genuinely surprised by how much I knew about their backstory. And that allowed me to ask little questions to draw it a little bit more. I think I've reduced filler words. So ums, and just general noise that doesn't necessarily need to be there, which improves the listening experience. I think there's more variety in my acknowledgement phrases as well. And by that, I mean, If a guest says something, sometimes I'll say, yeah, that sounds great, or absolutely agreed, or of course. I've tried to vary that because when I was listening back to critique myself and learn how I could improve, I was listening to me say similar phrases all the time. And if I'm noticing it, if you're listening to my content on a weekly basis as well, then you probably notice it too. And sometimes it's nice for a little bit of variety too. The last thing that I think I've gotten a lot better at is I ask short, very direct questions sometimes to let the guest dive deeper into what they've just said without me giving a lot of caveats. So rather than saying, that's interesting you say that, from this perspective, I wonder, and then blah, 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 just saying, okay, that's interesting. Why do you think that? And just allow them to continue onwards. So just asking a short question to go straight back to the guest and allow them to continue in flow of where they were going. Number 13, not a question, but every morning I start my day with your podcast. Thanks, brother. I'm very, very glad you enjoy the show, and I'm hoping I pronounced your name right, but thanks very much, Reshi. I really appreciate the support, and I'm glad that I've become part of your morning routine. The funny thing is, the more new people that discover the show in recent weeks and dive into the back catalogue, they find that there's obviously hours and hours of stuff that they can listen to. So you could potentially start every single morning with my podcast for up to 150 odd days, which is a mad thought, isn't it? Number 14, do you never feel like the bathroom during an interview? Anyone who knows me or has met me knows that I pee almost every hour and a half. So, yes, of course, I have needed the bathroom during an interview before. I do think being focused on a task means you forget a little bit. One of the examples that I was given is like if you think about when you're on a long drive or maybe when you're watching a film in the cinema, you can focus on the task at hand and it helps you to hold on and not necessarily need as much. Thankfully, I've managed to hold on for most of the longer episodes that I've done. I've never had to charge off and say, excuse me, I'll be back in a second. I need to go to the bathroom. It's probably, actually, I found it worse when I've been in the studio because I'm sat down, whereas for most of these podcasts, I stand, and I just think you need the bathroom more when you're sitting than when you're standing. I don't know if there's any logic to that. Anyone can if you're going to share this to your Instagram story, tag me and tell me, do you need the bathroom more when you're standing or sitting? That's an interesting challenge for you. Okay. Number 15, what first led to you investing in crypto? I just had good information from people that I valued and thought they knew what they were doing. I had been aware of it for maybe 18 months at the time, but very, very skeptical. I actually first heard of Bitcoin in like 2014 when I was at university, just finishing university, but I didn't understand it at all. And so for me, a kind of mixture of things. I was speaking a lot to Deck and Dawn. They came on the podcast in October 2020. I was pretty horrified by the fiscal policy and how the economy was being managed during that period. And I saw crypto, in particular Bitcoin, as another diverse asset class for me to invest into. Interestingly, I don't know if everyone had this shared experience, but I think a lot of people I've spoken to did. And it's maybe a reason that we're coming into some economic pain just now. But when I was at home during the lockdown working full time, and not really having a lot of things to spend my money on, I had more capital available. So I just basically freed up more money to invest. And one of those things that I invested in was crypto. And that was actually one of the reasons that the S&P 500 in America, as a stocks and shares fund, it saw almost a little bit of a bubble because a lot of money was being spent that wouldn't normally be spent, and it was creating almost fake value. So it's an interesting process. But what first led me to crypto, conversations with people I trusted and understood where they were coming from, disenchantment with fiscal policy, and seeing Bitcoin as an opportunity to invest. Number 16, what does retirement look like for you, and what age do you want to achieve that? I would like to be financially free during my early 40s. That would mean I would be in a position to retire from any job or activity that was done purely for financial necessity. And it would allow you to explore any area that you have an interest in at that period in time. And I think anyone, again, that knows me at all well would know that I probably wouldn't be somebody that would retire to do absolutely nothing at all, or to just play golf or go on holiday or just go to the gym. I would probably like to double down in any creative aspect I was doing at that time. So if, for example, I was working in the corporate world and I was completely financially free, and I decided I just wanted to do the podcast, or I just wanted to do whatever medium was available at that time, whatever that is in 10, 15, 20 years, then I would just double down on that, because even if it wasn't fiscally rewarding, I would be able to spend any time I wanted on it without the need. you do see this with some of my financially independent guests. I interviewed Steve Adcock, and that was just at the end of last year. And he was financially free at 35 years old, but he still blogs, he writes newsletters, he has courses, he supports people with his online content, because he told me he would just be bored. And there's actually a much higher percentage suicide rate in financially free, retired early people than there is in the general population. It's because they lose their purpose in terms of they're working towards something, and they don't keep busy and they don't keep their mind occupied. And that would absolutely not be me. Thank you very much. Number 17, what's your 5-year plans? Long-term listeners, again, will know that I'm not great at setting big goals. Instead, I'm very good at doing the process that will move me towards having options of achieving good things. But I would say, in a top level, I want to work in a career or a business that gives me fulfillment. So in 5 years' time, I expect to be doing that as well. So I want to be fulfilled and have a purpose from what I'm doing daily, from like a feedback perspective in terms of how that feels, but also fiscally. I want to create content on this podcast that I'm proud of and I'm pleased with, and it supports and helps others to work towards their best self. I want to be, in 5 years' time, working towards having a happy, stable family. And I'd like to still be known as somebody that others enjoy spending time with, while of course I too am having fun and enjoying myself as well. So that's the aims for in 5 years' time. It's quite broad. Question number 18, what did you think of the Ronaldo interview? So Ronaldo went on Piers Morgan close to the time of recording, but a couple of weeks after when this episode will come out. I thought it was a pretty mixed bag, because I think he's clearly been missold what United were planning to do in terms of where they were getting back to, how fast they were planning to get back to that, and what steps they were going to take to do that. So with that in mind, the environment that he was stepping into, the colleagues he was going to be working with, the club that was going to be around him, even like the managers and the senior staff that he was going to be working with, you can understand why he was disappointed in that regard. And you can understand why that meant that his attitude was more detached than ever before, because I think you, from the outside looking in, you look at Ronaldo, he clearly has a large ego. I think anyone that achieves that level of greatness will have some other flaws or intense personality traits in other areas. Look at Tiger Woods, look at Michael Jordan. These guys are quite tortured individuals, but in their sport that they've applied everything to, they are like among the greatest that have ever done it. And Ronaldo is certainly in that category. So it's a very mixed bag. You feel some empathy for him, and it's interesting that he was able to share all of the challenges that he had, particularly around his family bereavement as well. And I think you can only feel empathy for him based on that. However, I would also caveat and say that some of his professionalism in recent weeks has been pretty bad, but perhaps it's a case of the straw that broke the camel's back to some extent, where he was just so sick of how the club environment was going, so he started to act out. Now, that's a little bit petulant, and you wouldn't expect that. You wouldn't hope that he would do that, but that's certainly what he's done. The most interesting thing about the situation was, obviously, one, Morgan was giving him pretty, what I would call, softball questions, where he was trying to make the guest look as good as possible. And that's for a podcast like mine, that's absolutely fine. But for like a PR rejuvenation piece in terms of Ronaldo getting his side of the story out there absolutely should have been some challenge to it. Even like looking at how Morgan interviewed Andrew Tate, or interviewed Jordan Peterson, or interviews other people as well, he tends to have a little bit of pushback, which you would almost expect from him, given what Ronaldo has done recently, like refusing to come on as a sub, like whatever else he's been accused of within the dressing room. And I don't think Morgan did his duty to push back a little bit. It was very much a puff piece, and it was very much a rejuvenation piece. And I think you see that as well. Like I think some people are now using podcasts as, yes, they're always used as PR and opportunity to put themselves out there. But I think if interviewers are incentivized potentially to make somebody look good, I think that can lead to a very one-sided interview that doesn't provide all the story that we could have potentially got. Number 19, from every pod you've done, you need to choose 3 guests for a startup. Who are they? This was definitely the hardest question I'm going to be answering today, and I've answered so far. But I'm going to go initially. My 2 salesy, high energy people that are going to join me are going to be Richard Dixon and David Hatt. So Richard's in property and entrepreneurship. David is the founder of MTN Coaching, both of whom are absolute legends of the podcast in terms of the number of people that have listened to them and enjoyed their content. They are extremely innovative, hardworking, focused, They're very good salespeople as well. And I think alongside myself, we would have fantastic sales skills to present that and brand it and talk to people about it and get buy-in and push it forward. However, we would also need help with like the branding and the copywriting. So I'm going to draft in Chris Burns. Chris and David work together already, so that'll be helpful. So it'll just be myself and Richard adding even more energy and ego to the team. But I think if you were to look at a combination of people, that has got a huge amount of forward momentum. It's going to be quite an intense atmosphere. It's going to be a very driven atmosphere, both in terms of like wanting to achieve great things, wanting to build something special, but also to fiscally make a lot of money, which I think any startup should be driven by, because cash is king and profit is absolutely vital in these businesses as well. Whereas I think in some startups, the purpose or the aim of it can be greater than the fiscal need. And that's why some of them fail, because they're maybe not looking after the number one thing, which is sales in the door and capital. And I think that combination of the four of us would certainly achieve that. But that was such a hard question because there's so many good options, and I could easily pick 5 or 6 different combinations quite comfortably. Number 20, what's the best piece of advice you've been given? My mind is wanting me to answer this from a career and a work perspective, so I'm going to go with that for this question. And it's based on the teachings of Andy Bounds, who's actually been on the show. He is a leading sales trainer, and his methods were what I was coached in one of my previous roles. And he talks about an afters concept, and it's all about the fact that nobody cares what you do or what you sell. They care about what happens after they buy what you sell. So your most important contribution is the after impact of what you sold or what you've done for somebody else. That's what matters. So focus on making sure that somebody understands what happens after they buy your product, after they buy your service, after they've dealt with you. So from like a corporate perspective in my career, making sure that people that I'm selling to externally understand what it is my product, my service does, and what the impact for their business from a positive perspective is going to be, or what their impact on their individual life is going to be. Making sure my colleagues understand what the role of what I'm doing is going to be in terms of what's required from them, what's the impact going to be once we do it, and getting their buy-in from that. I think that's been a great piece of advice for me to apply to how I treat myself. Equally, I can apply that to the podcast world. So like when I am approaching a guest, I'm telling them what the outcome of the conversation is going to be in terms of, we're going to have a fantastic conversation. It's going to reach X number of thousand people. It's going to reach, you're going to get 3 clips off the back of it to use for your social media. You're going to have the opportunity to explore and brand yourself about a particular topic that you're passionate about. So you're selling what's going to happen afterwards rather than what's going to happen, which is a 60-minute conversation on StreamYard or in a studio at Charing Cross in Glasgow. Number 21, what 3 things would you prioritize instilling into your kids? What would you want to teach them? I want to be a really good father that acts as a role model and gives them the support that they need to be their absolute best. I say them, I probably want to have 2 boys. I think I've said that in the podcast before. But if I'm going to narrow it down to 3 things I would want to instill in my kids, it would be things that I think I would recommend to everyone to do. And that is, number 1, train and respect yourself. So have like a level of self-respect and focus on looking after your body and your mind. Number 2 would be learn, read and write. So apply yourself obviously in the school system, but outside of that as well, and really focus on building those skills up where you're a willing learner, a sponge of information. You're reading and consuming widely, but you're also writing and creating and relearning those lessons and being able to articulate them. And the last would be to serve and elevate others through what you do. So whether that's your career or how you spend your time with people around you, or the business that you start, you want to be serving and supporting and elevating others around you through the activities that you take part in. And I think that's kind of what I want to do and want to try to do. So I would definitely want that to be the case for my children as well. Number 22, how have you changed the most over this last year? I think externally you can look at metrics like my promotion and the finances that have come with that improved package. That's been very important for me. The growth of the podcast, if you look at the podcast, it's continued to grow. It's released a lot more episodes. It's had a lot more big guests. It's had a lot more downloads. It's had a lot more ratings on Spotify or Apple. And it's got more exposure through the different conversations that I've had. So externally, that's been some big changes in the last year. Internally, I accepted the need to go on holiday more, and I actually signed some of the more capital that I got from my promotion to making sure that I was comfortable with spending a good amount on going on holiday. So that was an important recognition for me, because I hadn't been away since September 2019. I also let myself be a little bit more spontaneous more often. Now, that's with the caveat that I still feel like I have to work very hard in the interim to free up the time to do this. So, for example, you're hearing this while I'm in Dubai, but the graph beforehand has been significant to make sure that I freed up that time. But equally, I have met a friend for a coffee last minute. I've gone on a last minute night out with my friend Johnny Rose. I've turned up at an event like with like 4 hours notice, which in the past I would have struggled more to do, and I would have maybe stuck to my guns in terms of where I was regimented and planning to do. So I think that's been important for me. I also internally, I think I know even more what I want, and especially what I don't want from a future girlfriend as well. So that's probably things that have changed in the last year. I'm much clearer on that as well. Number 23, main focuses for next year, excluding the podcast. We are bringing on a new colleague or potentially two in work to help to continue to grow the business unit that we work within. So we want to be supplying more furniture to more universities and more PBSA developments. We want to be working with more HMO landlords. We want to be basically kitting those guys out with the best from our student range. But we also want to grow into the independent schools market, which is for fitting out boarding houses and common rooms and amenity spaces, as well as I will be doing a little bit in the BTR space. That's the build to rent space. So I'll be working with developers in that space to furnish their properties too. Away from work in terms of focuses, I want to make sure that I continue to enjoy my training and my exercise while challenging myself. I really challenged myself with the growth project at the start of last year. I did a bulk, and then I did the 12-week peak with MTN for the summer to do a photo shoot. But since then, I've probably been coasting a little bit. So I don't want to let myself become too stale. So when I get back from Dubai and I reset my goals and my plans for next year in terms of like physique and training, I want to make sure that I keep that fresh. So I need to have a real consideration of what that might look like. I want to be actively social. I want to watch more live music. Anyone that listened to my 30 Thoughts at 30 would have heard that I'm very keen to go and watch more live music and really embrace that. And I want to continue to allow more flexibility to accommodate new people and new experiences within my lifestyle. And last but by no means least, you did say excluding the podcast, but is linked to it, is create far more written content that will rival and sit alongside my podcast as something that people consume and enjoy. And that would link to writing my ebook, which is still on the way. I promise it's there. If you're not already, please hit the link in the show notes and join my email list to keep up to date on that. Question 4, and this will be maybe a more controversial one. My opinion on the top G, Andrew Tate. So anyone that calls him the top G is obviously very in favor of him. And I think people need to take a step back from what we have seen and heard of Andrew Tate so far from both himself, but also from other people and other commentators as well, because the views seem quite polarized, and that's probably by design. And I'm going to say that I think sometimes society needs to hear a more extreme message to move it towards where it needs to be. And I spoke about this with Thomas Maw on a recent episode. Society has become so debased from traditional values of how people might behave or understand themselves, and it's massively embraced a victim mindset. It's refused responsibility. Men in particular have appeared lost. I think it's a big part of the men's mental health crisis. And while Andrew Tate has some views that are beyond what we probably want society to move towards and where we want it to finish, he actually has a number of important points. He encourages men to take accountability for themselves in terms of how they look and how they feel. He encourages them to train, to develop skills, to financially level up, to look after their dependents, to support those around them. And with that in mind, I don't think you should throw the baby out with the bathwater because he has other views that you don't agree with. I don't think you should disregard everything that somebody says because you disagree with every single part of it. Again, when I was talking to Thomas Maw, I said that I disagree with Jordan Peterson's stance on diet and carbohydrates. However, I really like what he has to say about masculinity, personal responsibility, education, being articulate. These are all things I get tremendous value from. So I don't think you need to agree with everything somebody says or even agree with a fraction of what somebody says to take something from them in overall. For example, let's go to Andrew Tate, something I disagree with. He had a viral tweet in 2017 before he was really the size that he is now, saying depression isn't real. And I would disagree with that. I think depression absolutely is real. It's diagnosed. It's a mental health condition. And I could likely pick another however many clips or pieces of content I've seen of his that I don't agree with. But I do think that he has a place to contribute to the discussion in terms of where the world should move towards and how it should be. And his cancelling for me is completely outrageous. And anyone that is supporting the silencing of one particular voice should absolutely beware the day that their voice is the one that gets silenced, because there's nothing to stop the goalpost moving or changing over time to mean that what you hold dear or what views that you put out into the world suddenly become unacceptable. And encouraging people to be removed from platforms and deplatformed and not allowed to speak is a very, very dangerous precedent to set. So for me, my opinion on on the top G, Andrew Tate, is that he absolutely has a place in the dialogue. He has some value to give. I disagree with some elements of what he has to say, but I don't think I should agree with every element of what everyone has to say. And I think he definitely deserves the opportunity to share what he has to say, of course, without the with the caveat that people should be challenging him as well on some of his views too, to try and get to the bottom of why he thinks the way he does, and that would put us all in a better position, in my opinion. Number 25, what episode is the most underplayed for its value? All of them, but in all seriousness, isn't it? Well, hopefully go listen to all of my episodes, but if I was to pick just one that I think is undervalued or underrated, episode 29 with Nora Simpson is on sleep. Nora is a professor at Stanford University, and sleep is the single biggest performance enhancer that most of us need to do better. The episode 29 is probably in the top 20 most listened out of the 150 or so podcasts that I've done, but it's the one I think people could definitely listen to twice. They could learn from, they could take notes in terms of how to improve their sleep environment, how to improve their sleep hygiene, how to improve their habits, and also understand more about the benefits that sleep has, or understand why they might not be performing as well mentally or physically off the back of a poor run of sleep or poor habits around it as well. Number 26, masculinity. How do you think this relates to homosexuality, and would you try it? This question came from an anonymous account with no followers and not following anybody. So, and no posts, completely private. So I think this question is designed to be difficult to answer, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Masculinity and homosexuality are not concepts that are at loggerheads with each other. Of course, you could be masculine and homosexual. There's nothing about it that wouldn't allow that to happen. However, I think the modern perception of homosexuality is more camp than it is masculine, just based on what we see traditionally in society, particularly in the mainstream media. Again, I have many gay colleagues who I would consider to be masculine men in some regards, but in other ways they are much more effeminate in terms of their dress style, in terms of their mannerisms. They are more effeminate than they are masculine. But masculine traits aren't just in how you are reflected. They can come from like your personality, your tone, your assertiveness, your behaviors in terms of how you speak to yourself and how you handle yourself as well. So I don't think it's not incompatible. However, I think the modern image of homosexuality is not masculine in the slightest. And would I try homosexuality? No, thank you. That's not for me. Number 27, what are the most important skills for corporate career success? I think you need to have an ability to learn. So taking on vast amounts of information, genuinely, when you first start a job, when I first started after university, I felt like I was, the fire hose treatment is one of the things that people talk about. So trying to drink from a fire hose. So you're getting so much information in, like it's hard to actually keep it all down your throat, so to speak. And for goodness me, I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's very important you have an ability to learn. So taking in vast amounts of information and actioning it and understanding how to do that. Other skills I think would be communicating well. So that's both internally with your own team and your colleagues, but also externally with any customers or businesses that you're dealing with externally, and just being really clear and concise and listening well as well, which is a big part of that. I think you need to be resilient as well. So throughout your career, if let's say you work from the age of 20 to the age of 60, for argument's sake, you're getting a little bit early retirement, because I think the retirement age is going to continue to push up. But if you work for 40 years, there's going to be peaks and troughs during that period that you need to be resilient to and to be able to manage. So for me, resilience is going to be absolutely huge. I think you need to have professionalism and know your audience. So know how to conduct yourself with the CEO versus knowing how to conduct yourself with other colleagues that are not as high ranking. Being able to adjust your language to to suit that and to be professional and to also know your audience and communicate in a way that's effective. And the last one for success in a corporate career is definitely negotiation. And that's not just externally with customers in terms of winning business or to look after clients that you've got. It's leveraging value internally to make sure that you're paid what you believe you should be paid. So whether that is going for interviews more often with other firms to understand what your market value is, whether it's having good recruitment contacts who can bring jobs to you that you might want to be interested in, or whether that's when you do get into the final stages of an interview, really asking for what it is you want in terms of how you want your contract and your hours to be structured, but also your fiscal package in terms of your base salary, your bonus, your commission, whatever it is, making sure that you are confident in negotiating those. And when you're leveraging value, understand that years served, unfortunately, is still a big metric, but also your skill set is vital too. So I know that I'm maybe not the absolute most experienced business development professional at 30 years of age. However, I know that I can drive tremendous value from what it is that I do because my experience during those years is significantly more than some people of my age. Equally, my experience might be a lot less than other people my age as well. So they should leverage their value accordingly in the careers that they apply themselves in. Last question, 28. Would you do an informal podcast in the form of a YouTube video doing a workout with somebody? This maybe links to when I was asked about why the YouTube channel is called Calling CamBro rather than CamBro Conversations. It gives you scope to do things like that. I don't think the audio quality would be good enough on during a workout and with me and whoever I'm training with grunting between sets or during sets. I don't think it would be particularly listenable from an audio perspective, but as a video, yeah, absolutely. Like if you did if you like, sometimes when I train with my friends, like I wish we'd filmed it because the chat is so interesting. It's so good. Like in particular, I trained with David Tate at the weekend, and we had some amazing chats on business, mindset, relationships, everything, even recommendations for what I should be doing when I'm out here in Dubai, and it was fantastic, and I definitely think there's a benefit to that, and it's a different style of episode to the ones that you would do when you're just sat in front of a microphone together. But that is a wrap for episode 159. Thank you so much for joining me. As I said throughout this episode, please make sure you are subscribed and following on whatever app you're on. You have left a 5-star rating if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, and you have joined my email list, which will be in the show notes, and it'll keep you up to date with what's coming in terms of my ebook and all the different other things that I get up to. Thanks always for your support, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.